Hello and welcome to Babalu B-Sides, the show where we pull back the curtain on the creative process with the folks who brought this audio drama to life. Babalu follows the story of Louisa, a writer who discovers dozens of cassette tapes left behind by her late mother, Sherry. On today's show, we're going to discuss two major themes from the show: Asian American heritage and mental health. In case it isn't already evident, major season 1 spoilers ahead. So if you haven't already finished season 1, you've been warned. My name is Jackie Rae Aubel, and I am thrilled to be joined today by Babalu's director, Katharine Chen Lerner, and series creator, Kimberly Truong. Let's dive in. Kim and Kat, welcome back to Babalu B-Sides. I'm so excited to be back here with you guys today.
We're so happy to be here.
Let us dive right into one of today's main topics. So like Babalu's two main characters, Sherry and Louisa, both of you are Asian American. So I would love it if you could tell me a bit about your cultural background and how it influenced your work on Babalu. Kim, why don't you start first?
I was raised by my mother, who is Vietnamese, came here as a refugee. She very much inspired, obviously, a lot of Babalu, and I'm mixed Asian. My biological father is Caucasian. My stepfather, who I consider my real dad, is also Caucasian, but Canadian. So I had an interesting upbringing with a Vietnamese mother and a French Canadian father. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the show, but it was really cool to bring very particular moments from memories that I have of the two of them into Babalu. And yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's the breakdown.
Amazing. And how old was your mom when she came out here?
She had just turned 30.
Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know she was basically an adult when she came out here.
Isn't that crazy? I think about this a lot, actually. Now that I'm older, it's actually a line that I have Louisa say in Babalu, which is, "I'm older now than my mother was when she recorded these tapes." And I am 40 now, and I am 10 years older than my mother was when she arrived to America, having to learn English. She was in law school when she left Vietnam.
Dang.
Like, I can't even, literally, I can't even imagine me 30 years old, someone being like, everything you knew about your home, you can know, and your life is gone. It's over. We have to go start anew. We can't stay here. It's not safe. Just for some quick background, like Southern Vietnam and Northern Vietnam were obviously at war. And my family was from Southern Vietnam, which is Saigon, which now has since become Ho Chi Minh City since the fall of Saigon. It was not safe for the people who were fighting on the side of the South, which was what the Americans were fighting on the side of the South against quote unquote communism. And they were putting people in re-education camps, killing people, torturing people. And not a great time to be in that country post-war, especially when you were supporting the opposition. Really like colored in who she was as a person, and I look back and truly recognize all the trauma she must have been through. So speaking of Asian American and mental health,
Kicking it off with a bang.
kicking off with the probably I think one of the most horrific traumas one could go through, having to leave your home and everything you knew behind, having to leave behind friends and family who can't go with you.
Yeah.
Be in the middle of school to study law. I think one of the most, I'll say this one last thing and then I'll hand it over to Kat, but one of the most tragic things I heard was my aunt telling me, she was the one who told me that my mom was in law school when they had left. And my aunt said, "Kim, if your mom was still in Vietnam and we were all still in Vietnam, your mom would be a judge today." Okay, so just to even color that in, my mother came to the U.S., married an American, had a baby, not me, my older sister, worked fast food jobs up until like she got sick. So yeah, it was a very different life for her. And I can't imagine what me at 30, someone you're going to have to learn a new language, a new culture, everything. But luckily my mother, the silver lining is she had her family, and majority of the family did come over after the war.
Yeah, dang, that must have been so. so much props to your mom for being able to persevere through that. And did she end up, you're from Florida. Did she land in Florida, or did she go to another state and then eventually move to Florida?
So the whole family wound up in South Florida, and I think it was because of my mother's sister, my aunt. She married an American, and they had established roots in South Florida. And naturally, when that's how immigrant families work, it's like, oh, we're over here. All of you come to this particular part of this country, this city.
Yeah.
Which is very cool. But we were all in South Florida for the most part. There's some, funny enough, that wound up in the OC or Riverside here in California. I say here as if you guys know where I'm at. We're in California right now, and hence why I base a lot of it out of California as well. So yeah.
And we're going to get into some of that California heritage and how that ties in with Asian culture and like the Asian diaspora that lives in Southern California. But before we get to that, Kat, I would love to hear your story and about your Asian American heritage.
Yeah, well, my mother's Chinese. She was first generation, so she was born here, and then so was I, but obviously her parents are from China. And I'm also mixed race, so my mom's Chinese and my dad's Caucasian. It's actually double heritage month for me because it's Jewish American month right now and API, so that's really fun for me. So, yeah, so Jewish Chinese. So, the kids in the playground always called me a Chew, so,
Chew?
a Chew. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's very, very unique.
Wow.
So creative. Anyways, but it was great. Lots of Chinese food all the time. It's very important, obviously, my Asian heritage and how I want to present and help the Asian culture and Asian stories, especially ones like Babalu. I will say sometimes I think about my mom and how, she was always taught to cover up any kind of Chinese culture for her. Even her name is a Chinese name, and she was told to become Mary Margaret in school.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was she in a Catholic school?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mary Margaret.
They love the name Mary.
They love it.
Wow.
They love it, man.
Sorry,
there were like
Catholics.
four. I think there were like four, and then she said there was like there was like four Mary Margarets in her class. You know what I mean?
Wow.
But I think her parents were very scared and had fear about how Asians were treated here, and luckily my mom always made me feel really confident about my heritage, and really proud about it, and loved that I wanted to know more about it, and made sure that she was never really a tiger mom. She always just allowed me to kind of go with wherever dreams I pursued. And I think that was also because of how she was raised a little bit, and she's a mathematician, and then she's now a CEO of a software compression technology company. So it was like really amazing to see my mom be kind of this very successful Asian woman, and I always felt like I could be whatever I wanted to be, which was amazing. I'm always really grateful for that kind of mother. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's really interesting that the two of you both have the Asian and white influence kind of coming together. And what you said, Kat, about how when your mom's family immigrated here, there was a lot of pressure to assimilate and to really eradicate any trace of the heritage. That was what was encouraged. And was that in Southern California?
Oh, no, sorry. My mom's Baltimore.
Baltimore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really interesting how that's the case. I'm curious, growing up, the two of you having Asian and white influence, what was it like seeing Asian characters depicted on screen and in pop culture?
We just talked about this.
You can't hear us smiling at each other through the mics.
But I mean, I was just talking about how my first probably person that I ever saw when I was like, oh my gosh, she's Asian, was Lucy Liu in Alan McBeal. Shout out that show. It's a great show. But, and Lucy Liu's an incredible actor and
Absolutely.
would die if I ever met her. But, that show, she's very hypersexualized, and she's kind of like a little mean. I just feel like a lot of the times in any kind of media, especially in, I would say, early 90s, which was kind of where we grew up, you know, I very felt like I saw a geisha, I saw a subservient, quiet little Asian, or I saw a dragon lady, a hypersexualized woman who was like revered and almost, you know, fetishized. Is that the word?
Yeah, I believe you're correct. Yes.
Yeah. And so the fact that, you know, we're able to talk about just a regular person who has, you know, who was trying to bring up a family and has a family of their own and is trying to just figure out herself in her 30s. You know, if that was being pitched, you know, back in the 90s as a television show or as a play or any kind of media, I think people would be like, oh, great, it's a woman in her 30s having a young child and talking about family problems. She's white.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think if anybody would have been like, what if she's Asian? They'd be like, well, we now have to figure out how she's gonna, you know, I don't know, how do some sort of sexy pole dancing thing. Right. She has to do
How will
origami.
anyone ever
She has
understand her?
Right. She has to have some
an
sort of fan.
accent.
She has to have an accent. She has to have a fan dance. She has to she has to wear when does she wear some sort of like geisha costume. Like, yeah, I feel like I remember having like a conversation when I was like a teenager or maybe even college, and talking about Sandra Oh and being like, oh my God, look at Sandra Oh on Grey's Anatomy. I wish I could be on Grey's Anatomy. And I remember them being like, well, if they ever cast another Asian in Grey's Anatomy, they'll have to be related to Sandra Oh.
What?
There can't be another doctor.
There can't be two Asian doctors.
There can't be two Asian doctors in any hospital.
The hilarity, the irony of
because that would be crazy. So
Asian doctors don't exist.
I mean, you know, so like, you know, if there has to be another Asian in Grey's Anatomy, it must be her sister or her, you know, she's too old to have a daughter. So like, you know, like I just remember people saying that and me being like, oh, okay,
Like there's only room for one Asian character here, right?
In television show, in movies, in plays.
And when that character is presented, their Asianness is front and center. It's a part of their personality. Kim, did you have a similar experience?
Oh my God, you just awoken so many different thoughts in me, Kat. It's unreal. I first want to shout out a dear old friend from college I met obviously in college. Marcus Yee. Marcus Yee is from Singapore, the most talented actor, dancer, writer. He's like in New York. The man's a lawyer by day and writing musicals by night. I'm going to send this to Marcus afterwards. It's been a minute since I've talked to you. But I'll never forget just how indoctrinated I was growing up. I am Asian. I grew up with an Asian mother. I was exposed to Asian culture. I went to school with so many different Asian cultures and peoples. And in college, I think I said something so dumb. I can't remember exactly what it was, but me and Marcus were, funny enough, having boba. Now, this was like 2005. This was like early day
in
boba.
Florida, boba?
Can you? I know, literally, it was the hottest, that new thing. Nobody knew what it was. Now, obviously, boba is everywhere, which I'm so proud of. I'm so glad that boba's infiltrated the United States in the way it has. But my God, I remember Marcus and I feel like we went to go get boba and we were just talking, and he had mentioned, I think, a script that he was working on. I'm so sorry, I'm butchering the story, but it was something like he wanted to work on a play or a musical that was centered around, I want to say it was around either the Great Depression or World War II era. He mentioned the lead being Asian, and I was like, Asian in that era? And he literally looked at me like I had, like I said, the stupidest fucking shit he's ever heard in his life, because it was stupid looking back. And he's like, Kim, you don't think Asian people existed in the 40s here? And I was like, damn, yes, you're right. That was stupid. Why did I say that? But I think it's because we have been exposed to media that says you don't really exist. And if you did exist, you literally just got here. You're fresh off the boat. You have an accent. you're othered, but then,
And you can't be a part of the main character story. Maybe you're like in the background, or maybe you have a scene with the main character, but you can't be a part of the main character story.
Yeah, but then you hear Kat's story, and her mother's Chinese and is first generation American. Her mother of her generation was born here, and there were so many people before your mother, Chinese Americans, Asian Americans, who were born here. There was a huge wave of Chinese Americans that came in late 1800s, early 1900s into the United States that we just don't acknowledge, or because it's just for a lot of unfortunate truths. But then again, you literally opened Pandora's box with me, Kat, with your statement, because then we go and we watch Sinners. Now we are seeing an era where we don't see Black people, Asian people being centered. And when we typically see movies or media made in this era, it's white people that are centered. And Ryan Coogler was like, nah, we're going to approach it from a very smart, very particular lens, which was all based off of real history. Like if you actually look up the history behind what he wrote in Sinners, these are based off real histories, real people that were here a long time ago. So anyway, I feel like I could go on and on, but yes, media, shout out to Sandra Oh and Shonda Rhimes, who literally made it normal for people of color to be in lead supporting roles. Huge. And yes, I get it. Meredith Grey, I get it. She's a white woman. She's the center of the show, but look at that show. That show is so diverse, and it's so diverse for its time. And then you look at Lin-Manuel Miranda, who then freaking was like, oh, you thought, like, he literally said, oh, hold my beer, and then like brought us Hamilton, which is white history presented by not white people. It's just a fantastic time to be alive now, because when we were growing up, we didn't have many examples, although I will shout out randomly Jubilation Lee, for anybody who used to watch X-Men, the cartoon. I was like, an Asian girl. Anyway.
I mean, I think I'm so
probably
happy.
Voiced by a white actress, I think, looking back.
I'm so happy you guys shared this story and this background. For anybody who is not watching the video, I am white. I'm very, very white. It's sometimes I know it's okay, but it's so like, what you guys are saying right now is like, it just highlights how important it is to have stories that showcase that not everybody has to have blonde hair, blue eyes, and white skin. Because even though you guys came from diverse backgrounds, Asian backgrounds, you still had this like subconscious bias of like, oh no, an Asian man can't be the star of a play or a film that takes place in the 40s. Like, even though you both had expressions of your heritage and your culture growing up, because you were consuming American pop culture, the message you were getting was, we only tell stories about white people here. And which is why I think Babalu is just such an incredible story, and why I love it, and why I think so many people are resonating with it, because you did such a good job of creating characters that have Asian American heritage, but that is not the only thing about them. They are rich, diverse, flawed, and beautiful characters. And yes, we have elements of their Asian culture baked in, like with the stinky tofu and with other cultural elements, but you created something that just feels so real and so tangible, and is something that people are relating to, which is why I think we're getting the response that you're getting.
And I think that is so freaking cool. Like, I don't think in a million years when we set out to do this thing that, I think there is a fear, and you tell me if you feel the same way. Sure. But I think sometimes there is a fear as a creator or a writer, performer, whatever, that now, oh, I've made this Asian. I've made this too Asian. Am I going to be alienating people? Are people going to find it hard to relate to, or what have you? Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I'm sure that's my own biases that have been woven into me by media and our culture and what have you. But it's so funny because now as a writer, all of my scripts have an Asian lead. It's like natural. It's either it's almost always an Asian woman lead. And to me, it's like, why can't that be the case? Like, why can't I write from a perspective of an Asian American woman and have her be entirely relatable. I'm not gonna lie. Also, sometimes I think it's interesting that is the show very relatable because we don't see anything. We don't technically see color, right?
Ooh, yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting thought experiment, but obviously the log line says Sherry Zhang, right? And you're like, oh, that's clearly an Asian woman's name or whatever. But
And Patty does have an accent.
Patty has an accent too, but I think because Sherry and Patty obviously had different upbringings, that it allows us to feel to have all these like varied experiences, and yeah, it's just so incredible to think that people are like, wow, I relate so much to this character. I said this in a previous episode that we recorded of B-sides, but I want to say it again if you haven't heard this previous episode. But we had a Zoom party for our final episode that went out as a part of season 1. We had people join. They could, listen. We all listened to the episode together, and then afterwards we did like a little bit of Q&A and saying hi to people. And there were strangers that joined this Zoom, and one of them left a comment, and she said, "Hi, I'm an Asian American woman, and I just want to say that this is the first time I ever felt like I truly met an Asian American character that I resonated with." The first time? What? I'm assuming this is a woman, she's not a teenager, right? She's been around for quite some time, like the rest of us. And she, like that, I said this before, I'll say it again, that's heartbreaking to me, but also like I'm honored. I'm honored that we created this show and presented these characters in a way that she was like, oh my God, I feel seen finally. Something that looks like me and sounds like me and has like the same thought processes and feelings that I do. But also like, why? It's 2026. How's that possible? But
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it just goes to show that up until very, very recently, Asian characters displayed in media were caricatures, essentially. And Babalu is a story where we're actually getting into what it means to be an Asian American, which, by the way, there's a gazillion different ways to be an Asian American, just like there's a gazillion different ways to be a white person. But I know that you guys actually contributed some of your own personal experiences into Babalu. So I would love it if you guys would be open to sharing some of that. Kim, I know that Uncle Jim was based on I think on your dad, correct? But I would love to hear like how you, like, if not a direct personal thing, like what is a moment in the first season of Babalu that you're like, yep, that's part of me, or that I relate to that.
I will say that Kat, as our director, and then like early on when this was just an idea and I was just an outline phase, like Kat gave me so much great intel, not only into your upbringing, but insight into like your mom's like upbringing. And I feel like a broken record. I feel like I say this all the time, or I've said it on past episodes, but Babalu truly feels like an amalgamation of all these different experiences of different women, different Asian people in my life. And funny enough, I met a film critic last night for this Tribeca mixer that they did. Random news. We
Just so
are.
people know.
Hold on, big alert, big alert, big alert.
We have been accepted into Tribeca. Babalu has been accepted into Tribeca.
The Tribeca Film Festival. The New York Tribeca Film Festival.
Tribeca, not a Bobo version. The Tribeca,
Not Triboca.
not Tribeca. The Tribeca Festival. Babalu was selected for a showcase, which is like, it's their inaugural showcase. They have an audio storytelling category. This is the first year where they have pulled together a curated list of their of podcasts that went out in the last year that they loved, and Babalu is one of them. Anyway,
Guys, I just want to pause. Congratulations, so freaking
so
well deserved.
exciting.
I'm
It's
so
so
happy
exciting.
for both of you.
We really hope that this, is able to bring more of a larger audience for people to listen to the story. And then also if you're in New York on June 9th.
yes, Tuesday, June 9th at 2:30.
Tuesday, June 9th at 2:30. Come and check out Babalu at the Tribeca Film Festival.
Have a good time. Have a good time. Yeah,
We're very excited.
We're very excited.
Will you
Oh
guys
my
be
God.
there? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
We'll both
Okay.
be there.
Oh, yes. We will be
Kim
there.
will be on stage and I will be in the audience with pom-poms.
Amazing.
I'll just put them in my blazer, and then all of a sudden...
And then jazz hands.
That will be stupendous. I can't wait for that. You shouldn't have told me.
Oh, sorry.
Now I have to, you're going to step it up a notch. You have to do something else. But yes, quick plug, find our showcase on Tuesday, June 9th. If you want to get some tickets, they're only $20. I think it's only like $20.
Come support. Come say hi. Come see other work. You know,
Yes.
it's part of a community. We're very excited to be part of that community.
Honestly, I'm like, wow. Like we're, again, I will move on from Tribeca and actually get back to my point. But like the other podcasts that are in our category that are being showcased, I'm like, whoa, how did we wind up here? Not trying to be self-deprecating,
but it's because it's an incredible show. That's how you end up there. But continue. You were talking to the film critic.
I'm very excited. Yes. So I talked to a film critic last night, and I was telling him about Babalu, and he was just like, "What?" He literally was like, "What audio fiction?" I was like, "I know. Just bear with me." But I told him that like a lot of he goes, "Is it based off a personal experience?" And I was like, what I like to say about Babalu is that all of it's true and all of it's not true. I feel like sometimes I forget, oh yeah, I wrote that based off a thing that actually happened in my life. Or I wrote that based off of a whisper that someone gave me that I was like, I think that's like so compelling. But yeah, going back to like the Asian women in my life, like Kat and Christine, who plays Sherry, like the humming of the lullaby, that was Christine saying, hey, I can hum a lullaby. And she said, I know a Chinese lullaby. And I was like, girl, done. And it ultimately became, I think, one of the most beautiful motifs of the entire series is that humming. And the stinky tofu was Christine telling me that was her favorite dish. Even the choice of like making Patty's store a florist shop that's based off my own aunt. Don't worry, it's not based. Patty's not based off of my real aunt, but yeah, there's just so much in here that was inspired. And I know we're on the topic of like Asian Americans, but I can tell you right now that the scene where Jim admits to Louisa, hey, your biological father came around when you were a baby and I told him to fuck off. That whole scene was actually inspired by my technically stepdad, who I consider my real father. He basically, as a kid, I grew up and I was like, I knew that my dad was not my biological father, but, I would say like, hey, what do you know about my biological father? Out of curiosity, not because I felt a need to know this person, but because, it'd be nice to know like, hey, what's my other half in regards to like heritage and stuff like that. And my dad was like, I don't know. He tried to come around a few times and one day he showed up and I told him, you don't need to come around anymore. We don't need you. That was what my dad said to this man. Then cut to me in my late 20s. I sign up for Ancestry DNA.
As one does.
As one does.
As one with questions does.
And this is after I lost both my parents, and I was just like, I wonder if my biological father is out there and I could learn more. At a minimum, I can at least get a DNA test and see what like my genealogy is and like what continent I go back to and what have you. And sure enough, I connected with my biological father on Ancestry DNA. I got a notification saying, hey, we found a match and it's your dad. And I was like, oh my God. So then it became an email like back and forth with my biological father. And he essentially confirmed what my dad said. He was like, except he made it even funnier. I'm not going to lie. He said, yeah, one day, he goes, you were very young, but I would show up, I'd pick you up, and we'd hang out for a little bit, and then I'd bring you back. And of course, I don't remember any of this, of course. And he said, one day I came to come see you, and you guys were no longer living there.
Oh my God.
And I literally, I think I just like broke down crying thinking about my dad, my real dad, because I was like, oh, he would do that shit. My real dad would absolutely, definitely did that shit. He's not alive to confirm that that's what happened, but he absolutely would have been like, yeah, we're moving. I'm not going to tell him. If he wants to find her, he can find us. And, it's so funny because I look back and Jim says in Babalu to Louisa after admitting this to her, maybe it wasn't the right thing to do, but it's what I did. And I look back and I was like, I don't know if it was the right thing my dad should have done, but I think I thank him for it, because ultimately, I hate to sound cold, but when I think about my dad, I think about the man who passed. I don't think about this random guy who I got connected to on Ancestry DNA. And it's, it is what it is. Like the father I know, he's gone. Like, he's not to be replaced. And I think it was really good for me to connect with my biological father as an adult and go, oh, you're not it, like you're not my father, and it's fine. But it just made it even harder to think, oh yeah, my dad's gone.
Yeah.
But yeah. That was that is from my real life. There's there's a bunch of inspiration in Babalu from everyone. But yeah, that's a very, very close to home example.
What about you, Kat? Is there any moment from Babalu that really rings true for you and your upbringing?
Not a specific moment, but I think a reason why I wanted to be a part of this story was I saw so much which I know we're going to go into soon, but in the mental health part of it, I saw so much in a young Asian woman always feeling like she's not enough. And that could be for so many reasons, whether or not, she's not enough Chinese, or whether she's not enough in her parents' eyes, or whether she's not enough in society's eyes. I don't even think it's just an Asian story. I do think it's a person of color story, especially in America, especially growing up, I was always a science and tech kid. I was always really interested in math and science. And sometimes people would be like, well, of course you're Asian, And so that's an interesting, color to put into a young child's eyes of the reason why they're smart or something has to do with their background. And I always think that's really interesting. Also, carrying your ancestors' weight of whatever that is, whether it's carrying, either your mom's or your grandmother's, expectations, or, carrying the weight of either wanting to make people proud or wanting to completely, be something different than what your ancestors were, trying to be step out of that light. I just think there's so much of that in Babalu. And that not only I connected to or just wanted to connect sometimes I feel like I want to connect to it for other people, if that makes sense. I feel like I was very lucky with my mom. I had someone who, again, never made me feel like I wasn't enough, And I think that's because, unfortunately, her mom very much, didn't know how to be a supportive mother. Sometimes I feel like I'm making this, helping tell the story of Babalu, for my young mom, because I imagine if my mom was a teenager and listened to Babalu, it would have made her feel less alone.
I love that. We are going to get to mental health, but before we do, I want to make sure we talk about Frederick Hsieh, because that was such a gripping part of the first episode. We find out that Louisa is really interested in creating this biography of Frederick Hsieh.
Can I just say, I'm sorry, that I just made my girlfriends listen to the first episode of Babalu, and when that was happening, when Louisa was talking about Frederick Hsieh, they paused it and they were like, is this a real person? And I was like, yes, it is. Unpause. You know what I mean? I was just like, yes, it is. And you're about to learn about it. But you know what I mean? It was just it was lovely white ladies. But I'm just saying, they were like, oh my gosh, is this a real person? They had no idea. So I was just going to say that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I'm not from Southern California, so I didn't grow up with Southern California history. I know a lot about New York, but that's it. But when I was listening to the show, I was like, oh my God, is this a real person? So for anybody who's not in Southern California, we're really close to the San Gabriel Valley, which is the SGV, which has an incredible robust Asian community, incredible food, supermarkets, like communities. It's really powerful. And I thought it was really great to introduce Frederick Hsieh as this interest of Louisa's to really hook us in and kind of give us a sense of what she was passionate about and the story she wanted to tell. So tell me about that. Tell me about that creative decision, Kim. I would love to hear about it.
So this is so funny. So Louisa obviously in episode 1 tells like exact monologue Kat was just talking about. In her pitch to Simone, she's talking about like how she came across like Frederick's story, and that's essentially what happened with me. I don't think I was out for dumplings with a friend, but I remember thinking I'm not from Southern California either. I have family that is here and grew up here. I grew up in Florida, then moved to California about 11 years ago. And it was so fascinating that the San Gabriel Valley was literally where all the Asian stuff was. Now, granted, LA is actually pretty diverse in that regard too, because we have Japantown or Sawtell, we have Little Tokyo. There's technically like we have Filipino Town, Thai Town. There's so many amazing parts of Los Angeles County that is very Asian influenced. But San Gabriel Valley is so special. So I was like, why are there so many Asians? Because again, I love the immigration stories of like, a huge Muslim population in Michigan, right? Like, why did that happen? Huge pockets of Ethiopians in Denver. Why did that happen? So basically, I want to read, if you guys don't mind me, quoting a Wikipedia page, which is quoting, I think, a New York Times article obituary that I came across when I was researching for the show. But I just want to show, like, just how rich this guy's history is. And there's more information that you can find online. I'll link to all this stuff in the show notes. But this is how fascinating he is. Also, fun fact, he's born on March 1st, which is the day before me. Wow, fellow Piscean. I knew it was I knew I loved him. So Frederick Hsieh, which is spelled Hsieh, was a Chinese-born American realtor and investor who founded the first Chinese-American suburban community of Monterey Park, California. Monterey Park is in the San Gabriel Valley. By purchasing and reselling plots of abandoned land in the city at premium prices to Chinese investors from Taiwan. In addition, he heavily promoted Monterey Park in newspapers of Hong Kong and Taiwan to encourage prospective Chinese immigrants to move to the city. In the early 70s, he predicted that the then predominantly Caucasian city of Monterey Park in the San Gabriel Valley would serve as an anchor for new ethnic Chinese immigrants as an alternative to the old Chinatown in Los Angeles. I forgot to even mention Chinatown. Yes, we also have a Chinatown. But it was immediately dismissed and brushed off as a mere speculation at the time. Wow. However, his prophetic words came true as many Hong Kong and Taiwanese immigrant elite and poverty-stricken ethnic Chinese refugees from Vietnam alike began settling in Monterey Park and in nearby Alhambra, Rosemead, San Gabriel. Additionally, many immigrants from mainland China who would have settled to traditional immigrant points such as San Francisco or New York City have also arrived to Monterey Park and other parts of the San Gabriel Valley due to the work of Hsieh. Wealthier immigrants have since moved on to San Marino. It literally says in here, an expensive neighborhood, in parentheses. It actually is. It's
so
very
expensive,
lovely.
but it's
very
lovely.
lovely.
Yeah.
Wealthier immigrants have since moved on to San Marino, an expensive neighborhood, in large numbers during the 80s and eventually in other communities such as Walnut and Rolling Hills, thus giving rise to the new suburban Chinatown areas in the Los Angeles area. In the 80s, for the first time in U.S. history, Monterey Park became the first suburban city with an Asian American majority population. Hence, Hsieh is generally credited for leading the way to Chinese immigration in the greater Los Angeles area. This process initiated a wave of some white flight, which is, again, also in Babalu, from then white bread communities. He owned and operated the prominent Chinese American realty company Mandarin Realty, which still operates in Monterey Park. As a developer, entrepreneur, he was also a community activist. He left a historic mark on the city of Monterey Park and the entire region. Hsieh died while visiting Las Vegas in 1999.
Wow.
So come on. I mean, if I wasn't working on Babalu, I would be working on something about this guy. It's incredible. Truly, it's one of those things where you look back and had he not made the choices he made, had he not made the business bets he made, taking out ads in Chinese newspapers, it would the San Gabriel Valley be what it is today? Probably not. But it's incredible to think that here's this man who I did not know anything about, quite frankly, until I literally Googled, how did the San Gabriel Valley get so many Asian people? And then his obituary came up, and then that's ultimately how we got Fred's story in here.
That's fascinating.
It's truly like the Wikipedia page. I mean, we could go on and on, but you drive through the San Gabriel Valley, and if you've never been to Los Angeles, and you should go to the San Gabriel Valley. It's not anything tourist, it's not a tourist destination, but it's some of the best food. So much great culture. Kat did a play in Sierra Madre. You did the Joy Lit Club.
In 2019.
And again, it was just like...
And it was one of like their most sold out shows.
And then didn't you guys go out for like Chinese food all the time after shows?
Every show.
I feel like I came to one of them.
Every show we went out to a different Chinese restaurant.
You have so many options.
Because there were so many
here.
options.
It's so
many
wonderful.
options. It was incredible.
But that
show was like sold out every night.
That's
like with
awesome.
more people wanting to see it.
It was incredible. Oh, fun fact: Christine, who plays Sherry, was in the
Was
cast.
also in the Joy Lit
of the
Club.
Joy Lit
Yeah.
Club.
Yeah, that's so incredible. And it's like, I want to go to political so bad because it's like you talk about white flight and about like, ooh, we don't want to live in this community anymore. But now look at what the community is and like look at the people that like, because people will go to the San Gabriel Valley to get good food, to experience culture that they don't have other places. And so it's just the hypocrisy there is.
While we're speaking on the San Gabriel Valley, before we move on, I reading they listed out Rosemead. Now, Rosemead, if you're not aware, is a town in the San Gabriel Valley, and it's also a movie starring Lucy Liu that came out this past year, and it's based off a real story. While we're talking about Asian Americans and mental health, I don't know if this is a segue, but it's based off a real woman. Funny enough, Christine, who plays Sherry, told me about this story before I even...
But I really want to see it. Yeah.
I don't want to give any spoilers, but it's about a mother, a real mother who lived in Rosemead, Chinese, right? I think.
I think so.
And her son, this is not that long ago, by the way. This is probably, I think, 10, 15 years ago. Had a son, and the father, I think, passed for something tragic. And it was just her and her son, and he unfortunately had some mental health issues, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. This might be a spoiler. It doesn't end well. Let's just put it that way. And it's interesting to read about this story. And if you want to skip over this part, because I will start saying some spoilers, but the real story of that Rosemead mother is she becomes worried because he starts talking about violence. He starts following, I believe, the Columbine shooters. He's like becomes fascinated with these school shooters. And she then gets diagnosed with cancer. So she's like, oh my God. not her words. I'm paraphrasing. She's like, oh my God, there's no one who's going to take care of my son. And she makes the very difficult decision of killing her son.
Dang.
Yes. So I wish Christine could have joined us. Unfortunately, Christine could not join us for this recording today, but we love her and she's here in spirit. Yeah. But Christine, when she told me about this story, she said, oh, I thought this would resonate with you because it's about a mother's love for her son, ultimately. As fucked up as that might sound, the fact that she's like, my son is unwell. I'm worried that he's going to do something terrible to other people. Like, as in her act as a mother, protecting not only her child, but other people, protecting her child from himself. But yeah, it's wow, talk about different definitions of motherhood and what acts of motherhood can look like.
And how certain circumstances can influence decisions, right? And like getting behind the why. I mean, when we end Babalu season 1, we know that Sherry passed away when she's 29, and up until that point we believe it's because she's killed herself, but we kind of have left at the end of the story of like, wait, was that really what happened? But yeah, Sherry's love for Louisa, as even just demonstrated through those tapes, is so visceral, and it's so intense and full. And so I will just let you know, as a listener, I'm like, I don't know if she did it, because I feel like she wouldn't. But that being said, I think we should segue schizophrenia. So let's talk a little bit about mental health here. So for just FYI, I have a degree in marriage and family therapy, though I am not a practicing therapist at the time. I do have a couple therapist friends, and I specifically reached out to my friend Annie Jan, who is a licensed mental health counselor in New York City, and she actually specializes in the AAPI population. Her and I met in college.
Amazing.
And she has now started in her practice, which we'll link all the stuff in the show notes. She has found herself in this specialty where other Asian Americans go to her because she is Asian American.
Yep.
And there's all of this cultural context. And we also want to just share that while we're talking about these really heavy topics, 988 is the National Suicide Hotline where you can text and chat, and we'll also link that in the show notes. Well, let's back up to our 3 main characters, Sherry, Louisa, and Patty. All 3 of these women have very different connections to their Asian American heritage. They have very different worldviews. And I'm just curious, I would love to kind of kick this conversation off by how their different experiences created tension in the series. And just talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, Patty's very traditional and very, a little, I would say old fashioned. And I would say Patty's generation was probably taught to sweep mental health under the rug and to not talk about it and not have much education about it. And also because of that, whenever you're sweeping something under the rug or have no education, sometimes there's a lot of fear and then there's a lot of shame. And so I would assume that Patty's pretty shameful, has shameful feelings that her sister took her own life and doesn't want to talk about it ever. Which is very unfortunate for Louisa, because then she doesn't get to really understand her mom.
And Patty was born in China, correct?
Yeah.
And then she came to the U.S. when she was teenager. Okay. And then we have Sherry, who's born in the United States, correct? But is raised by Patty and her father, who are
well, technically raised by her mother and her father, and then her mother leaves to go back to Vietnam. Yeah.
Yes. And so Sherry, on the other hand, so Patty and Sherry are sisters, but they're half sisters. Patty's quite a bit older than Sherry. We see in Babalu, Sherry has some mental health issues going on. She's a very lonely person. She feels deeply, seems to be maybe going through some auditory hallucinations as well. But she doesn't even dig into her mental health right away, right? She analyzes it. She goes to school, which I can relate to that. Trying to learn more about my own mental health by studying it. But she actually doesn't go to therapy. It isn't until Louisa is on this journey that she embraces therapy and actually analyzing her mental health. And so I found it as a listener really interesting to see just those 3 women, 3 technically different generations, how they approached mental health. And I would love to know,
maybe, I don't know if you've asked your friend, but I think it's only been very recently that the Asian community have been open to talking about therapy.
Yes.
That's also something that is pretty shameful, or pretty much like, you don't need that, or why would you need that, or you going to therapy makes the world look bad on us, or if you go to therapy, it will make the family very shameful. I think that's a very Asian maybe stereotype I've heard from a lot of my Asian friends. It was very looked down on to go to therapy.
100%. And I will say, from my point of view, so I got my degree. I was an intern therapist for a bit. I'm still really passionate about it. What I've heard from my friend and from other therapists I know who are in practice is like all therapy and like most science practices and like how the body works, generally speaking, most studies are done on white men.
Yeah.
So whenever there's a deviation from that, it doesn't necessarily, sometimes like what worked for this person is not necessarily going to work for this person. And what I learned in my schooling was that Asian cultures tend to be a lot more community focused versus, and therapy inherently is an individualistic practice. And so sometimes you get that clash because in Asian cultures, again, I'm not in them. I only know the experience that my friends have told me and what I've seen in, the studies I've done. It's very common to just not think too much about yourself. Like analyzing your emotions is it's kind of almost self-centered in a way, and it's just so conditioned out of the culture. And this is what my friend Annie told me. She said, when I am seeing a new Asian American client, I often have to teach them the language of how to talk about their emotions. Sometimes they'll come to therapy and they'll think about, hey, I'm going to go to therapy, and it's like if I broke my arm. So I have anxiety. So what? That's going to be like 12 weeks of therapy. And then, and she's like, emotional growth is not linear. And so a lot of the time as an Asian.
What a great, can you say that again?
Emotional growth is not linear.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And then she's like, so a lot of the times what I have to do is I have to work with clients who may be the first person in their family to ever even consider therapy. And I have to do a lot of education about what this is actually going to look like. Like, you're not going to be fixed in 1 session or 5 sessions or 6 sessions. You may be on this journey for years, depending on what it is. And there will be conflict with and there may be conflict with how you were raised and how your culture thinks about this idea of you going into a room once a week for an hour and just talking about yourself. And I think that it like comes clear. That's one of the reasons why Babalu for me resonated so much, is because you see that so clearly in Patty, Sherry, and Louisa. It's like, and how just it's kind of almost like the more American they get, or the more influence of like American culture they get, the more open they are to exploring this. And was that intentional?
No.
That's how I interpret it, but I don't know. This is
that's actually, well, it's funny. I don't think I consciously thought of that. I will admit that. But I think that's a really strong observation, and probably like representative of reality. I think, as we hope, right, that every generation progresses more, right? And obviously I would hope that, I feel like you look at Gen Z, right? And they're very into talking about their feelings. They're way more in tune with their feelings than any of us were when we were growing up. Open to therapy, open to talking openly. They go on friggin' TikTok and talk to strangers about their feelings and random thoughts, which I think is fantastic. But the irony, though, is, so Sherry is, she is experiencing, auditory hallucinations, as you pointed out. It is acknowledged that her father was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And funny enough, that was inspired by my Caucasian French of Canadian father, who in his 50s was diagnosed. They were like, well, he's too old to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. But in his 50s, started having auditory hallucinations. Wow. He literally heard voices telling him that he should kill himself, that he's no good. And he went and saw some of the best doctors in the Boston area. And they truly looked at me and were like, we are not sure what is going on with your dad. And the best diagnosis they could give him was psychotic depression, which I had never even heard of before that point.
And this was when, like 2005, right?
We're looking at 2009 at this point, 2009, 10. Okay. And he was on a barrage of different drugs. He tried electroshock therapy, which is also a thing that still happens, but in a way more humane way now. And it was very jarring to experience my father, who was very jovial, very funny. Like I said earlier, told my biological father to fuck off, that we don't need you. Very confident in his place, to now like crumble in a lot of ways and lose his sense of self, because he was experiencing this very real attack on his mental, exactly, an attack on his mental health, and not knowing what's real anymore, and just seeing him, like, how the drugs affected him too. It made him very tired, very groggy a lot of the time. And yeah, a lot of that inspired, obviously, Babalu, and what you see in it in Sherry retelling how she experienced her father going through this and being diagnosed with schizophrenia, and how her and Patty didn't see eye to eye on how they should handle that. And then, Sherry calls out in the flashback scene in episode 7, she calls out Patty, young, obviously flashback Patty, and says, like, oh, you just want to stick me in a loony bin like you did with Dad. And there's just so mental health has come so far.
Yes, I do just want to say I am a big component of mental health. And I will say I specifically talk therapy. My mother was, and again, ahead of her time, and she realized that she needed therapy before having me.
Wow.
That was a whole thing. She was
Wow.
like, I know I need therapy before getting pregnant.
Wow, that is,
Yep. She was like,
wow.
I don't want to take some of my trauma and give it to my daughter. And so she was like, I'm going to go through therapy.
Oh
I
my
know.
gosh.
Yeah, I know. So
She should
like,
get a medal for that,
I agree.
honestly.
But yeah, so she always talked about therapy as something that was incredibly helpful and wonderful. And then like I've also, used therapy in my life. I truly have had like the same therapist for like over 15 years, and I love her so much. But I will say that my mother has said that she has had trouble talking to certain therapists about her Asian upbringing, and that they have had trouble understanding or have trouble like giving the right tools to like process what she went through in her childhood. And I think that's very fascinating too,
One thing that, again, my friend Annie mentioned, and actually I learned in my, so I went to school 2022 to 2023. I did the program at Phillips Graduate Institute, and they were very diversity minded. Like they were like, we did a whole class on diversity, and it spoke about like, if you're going to see a client from a background that's different than yours, you have to familiarize yourself with your background.
Wow. I feel like that's new, but keep going.
Could also be a Southern California thing too, right? Like there's, so just also, for everyone out there, if you were in the United States, I can't speak to any other country, but if you were in the United States, every state has different licensing requirements.
Wow.
California is one of the highest. Like you need to complete 3,000 hours before you can even sit for licensure. New York is also really high up there too.
Wow.
But other states have different rules. And a big thing that you hear it a lot of days now on like TikTok and Instagram is like people cutting off their parents, like just cutting them off. Just like, you know what? You're not serving me anymore. Goodbye. And my friend Annie was like, that is something that is so not, you can't even pitch that to an Asian American client. Like, because the idea of doing that is insane.
Truly insane.
But it's like, it's just interesting. Like, because of our cultural upbringings, we're always going to view things differently. And so there's therapist responsibility to familiarize themselves with the client's culture. And to that point, if anybody here is looking for a therapist, I mentioned this to Kim in the green room before, there are more Asian American therapists who are available now. There's more folks who are getting trained. But my friend Annie did want me to specifically mention that just because someone looks good on paper does not necessarily mean they're going to be a good fit. And she encourages folks to identify what's really important to them in a therapist, because even if the therapist isn't the same background as you, they could still have done the work to understand you. And she's like, it's the same thing as dating. And I'll say this too, like I've done my fair share of therapy. I've gone to therapists like 1 or 2 sessions and been like, no, you're not for me. But then I've had a therapist now that I've had for 6 years who I love. So it's very much it's a dating process. But I would definitely say if you were coming from a BIPOC or AAPI background, like, I think it's worth it to definitely ask your therapist. So tell me, what work do you do to make sure that you're a culturally informed therapist? She also wanted me to shout out a book that she thinks folks would really appreciate, which is called Permission to Come Home, Reclaiming Mental Health as Asian Americans.
I'm excited to read that book.
Yeah. That's a new one. I've not heard of it until you mentioned it.
I did want to just say, we had talked about this before, and again, I don't have the resources like in my brain right now, but I do know that very recently suicide has been very.
I actually have the stats. If you would
Great!
like me to read them.
I would like you to, please.
So suicide is the leading cause of death for Asian American and Pacific Islander youth, with the rate skyrocketing from 1999 to 2021, growing up by 72% for male youth and 125% for female youth. So going back to Babalu, right? Like, it's unclear whether or not Sherry died by suicide.
But she's not alone.
She's not alone. Like, this brings forth an issue that is clearly impacting the Asian American population. And I'm just curious, like you were mentioning before, Kat, like, you feel like you're telling this story on behalf of your young mom, on behalf of people that are going through this. Yeah. So what's it like now, like, processing it, and anything that you want to say regarding this that we haven't talked about already?
I mean, I think, anxiety, depression, loneliness, shame, I think those are really scary feelings to have. And especially if you feel like you can't talk about them with the people that should, quote unquote, love you and support you most, which is your family. That's a really hard place to be. And especially if your family is telling you that you can't go outside the community to get help. I think that's really, really hard. And I just hope that anybody out there who is feeling these really valid and real feelings, that's the other thing, is that I feel like sometimes any young person, especially, who is feeling some sort of anxiety, depression, loneliness, feeling of low self-worth, sometimes are told to shake it off, or to not worry about it, or to, just pick themselves up by their, bootstraps. And like, that's just like not helpful.
Yep.
Having community and having someone that sees you, even though you're going through something hard, and finds someone to help you, someone to talk, someone to look outside your community to make you stronger and help you process those feelings, are huge. And I think by telling this story of Babalu, we help that. I think by telling the story of a regular young woman who is having big life changes happening to her, but strives to be a better person, and strives to be a great mom, and strives to learn more and to become more than she's dreamed of, even though she, in spite of feeling these heavy feelings, I think that is a character to root for, and a character to hope the best for.
It's so funny, as you were saying that last part, I wasn't clear if you were talking about Louisa or Sherry until you mentioned that she was a mom.
The parallel.
You did such a good job.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I just want to piggyback off what Kat just said. Like, we talked about this earlier, about how the show feels relatable to a lot of people, and sadly, or maybe should be hopeful, I think this story is also relatable because feeling any sort of darkness or depression, or feeling like you can't carry this weight, and feeling like you're alone, is not unique to Asian Americans. And is unfortunately, those stats are horrific that you just read. But I think a lot of people relate to it because this is very relatable to feel these feelings.
It's a universal feeling.
It's very universal. And also, even we talked about earlier about the cultural stigmas across Asian communities. Now, obviously, Asians are not a monolith, but the stigmas of talking about mental health, the stigma of talking about even grief or loss. I had, unfortunately, a cousin who passed in a car accident, I think when I was very young, or even before I was born. Never talked about. And that was obviously something horrific, the pain of losing a child for my aunt and uncle, and a pain of losing a sibling for my cousins. But those stigmas are across many different cultures, right? I would even argue it's generational too. Like, my father, when he was diagnosed and experiencing all these issues with his mental health, like, he was so ashamed of it. And I think for him, it was also from the perspective of his generation and being a man, right? Like, being a provider and feeling like he was helpless and he couldn't provide. And so the reality is that I think Babalu's so relatable in that way because of, you know, Sherry's plight is not unique to Asian American culture. She just so happens to be Asian American and going through this thing. But yeah, and also like props to Jackie because episode 5, Year of the Snake, we open on a very long therapy scene where Luis is meeting a therapist for the first time, and that intake form that the therapist goes through, and we hear Luis answer all these questions, is a real intake form that Jackie gave me when she was in school. And I was like, yo, can you, you know, from a traditional standpoint, like, can you give me something that would be realistic? And sure enough, it was a true intake form, and those questions were taking word for word from a real intake form. And also another fun fact, Kathleen Gray, who plays the therapist, she is a therapist in real life.
Love that.
No way, really?
Yes. And she, when she read the scene, she goes, oh, you know, this would be like for a more like traditional clinician, like who would use an intake form like that. She's like, I don't personally use those. And yeah, I will say also too, last fun fact about like all the therapy that comes up in Babalu, my experience when I was looking for a therapist was very much Luis's experience. You would, and also not even when I was looking for myself. At one point, my younger brother was going through a really hard time, and I was trying to find him and my family a therapist. I swear to God, I would call therapist offices that no longer were in business but still had a voicemail running. Like, those were real things that happened. Or you would call and they'd be like, I'm sorry, we're not taking new clients. Or you'd call them, leave a message, you'd never hear back. Like, you call and you do connect with a therapist, and their rates are through the roof, and they don't accept insurance.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sorry. Like,
No,
it's
mental health is really hard, and it's hard to like admit that you need help, and then it's hard to get help.
yeah. And then when you
because-
realize you
yeah.
need the help, it's like almost
depressed.
impossible to find it.
Yes. And people give up. People give up.
That's so true. And part of the reason why I did not pursue a career as a therapist afterwards, because you learn kind of all the things and why certain therapists don't take insurance. Because guess what? Insurance providers, they look at mental health the same way they look at a broken bone. And having to justify over and over again, like, nope, I have to see this person once a week for the next X amount of years because they have anxiety. Emotional growth is not linear. And it's one thing to get awareness of what some of your issues are. It's a whole other thing to change behavior. And people can stick in the awareness stage for such a long time. There's a lot of different things but there are paths out there. And I was so happy to hear that Louisa joined a support group at the end of the episode, because I think support groups are excellent resources, especially if you are struggling with therapy. Like, I know even like sobriety groups, like there's AA, of course, everyone knows, but there's also ones that aren't as religious focused. Like, those can be really healing. It's so ironic. It's like when we have mental health issues, the urge is to isolate and to push away and to not deal with it. But it's through community and through groups that we actually find healing.
Yeah, not to spoil anything for season 2, but Louisa stepping into the support group is going to be a huge part of season 2, and the people that she meets in that group, to just give color to the many different walks of life that are affected by suicide, and, you know, survivors of suicide. I actually would like to shout out someone who reached out to me. She came across the show somehow, and she read the log line, and she said, hey, I think you should change the language from committed suicide to died by suicide. And I'm so glad that she brought that up, because I feel like I read about that or came across that notion at some point and obviously forgot about it, or it didn't come back to my brain, to the front of my brain. And she told me her own personal story about losing her husband to suicide because of medications that he was on. And she believed that he only was in that state of mind because of the medications that he was on, and which ultimately led to the death. But I was very thankful to her. I of course wrote her back, and I changed the log lines across everything. So if OG, if you remember reading the log line, it says Sherry committed suicide in 1989. But now if you read the log line, it says Sherry died by suicide in 1989. And I think even that consciousness of language, of how we're acknowledging not just suicide, but how we're talking about it and how we're looking at it from this very nuanced, very deep perspective of like, oh, this person, I think, if we were to talk about suicide even 10, 15 years ago, like I remember, us growing up and like how media showcase suicide, and suicide is always this it's like dramatic thing.
But it's also like committed suicide. Sorry to cut you off, but it's this implication that it's a violence.
Yes, that's exactly what she said. She said when people, thank you for bringing that up. She said in her message to me, using the word commit usually means that you did something illegal or criminal or bad. And because you would say commit a crime, right? You would say, and anytime we use the word commit, it's usually with a negative connotation. So thank you for bringing that up.
No problem. I can't believe that as your one of your therapist consultants, I did not catch that. I was like, shit.
Yeah, Jackie, this is your fault.
Yeah,
just kidding.
But obviously. No, I think the language, the language we use around suicide or around mental health struggles is like, no, these are real illnesses. This is a real problem. It's the same thing as if, and this is actually something that I spoke about when I was in school about getting people to overcome medication, because there's also sometimes this stigma for folks who suffer from depression or anxiety, or where it's like, I don't want to get on medication. It's like, well, if I told you that you were diabetic, would you say, you know what, I'm just going to brace through it?
Yep.
No, you would take your medication. So what's the difference? And it's interesting because I think across cultures, there's stigma around mental health. But it is interesting as generations our generation came on. I feel like our generation, millennial generation, was more open to mental health. But now I feel like the ones behind us are even more open to it. I do want to point out we have been recording for over an hour, and I have a final question about mental health that I pointed out just looking at the log lines that I would love to kind of put a button on.
Yeah.
Because I mentioned that it's interesting how Louisa, Patty and Sherry dealt with their own mental health and their sadness and their grief in very like isolating ways, like kind of Sherry observed kind of her mental health through this like educational lens. Patty kind of ignored that anything was wrong. Louisa goes to therapy, she joins a support group. However, when Patty finds out that she has a brain tumor, she asks Louisa, don't tell Jim. And Louisa's like, I don't want to do that. But she has yet to tell Trey, her romantic interest, that her mother has died by suicide.
Hypocrisy.
Or fear.
Exactly.
But no, I think that's such a brilliant character choice, because that just goes to show you could be therapized up the butt. Not that she's therapized up the butt.
That's a whole other podcast.
But, like you can be someone who embraces mental health and acknowledges that you need help, that you need support, but you still have those moments of like, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to admit it. I just thought it was a really interesting creative choice on your part.
So two thoughts around that. So we were talking about earlier, like real life things pulled from my life. Aunt Patty telling Louisa to not tell anybody about her cancer or tumor at this point, to not tell anybody about this tumor is directly from my aunt. My Vietnamese aunt on her deathbed. This is not a joke. No. I laugh because it's crazy, but on her deathbed, I'm like 12 years old at this point. This poor woman is dying, and I didn't, of course I'm 12. I don't really understand everything that's happening. I know she's very sick. She's in her home. She's hooked up to morphine, and they're trying to give her a comfortable. She battled ovarian cancer, and of course now I understand as an adult like just how horrific that diagnosis is. At the time, she says to me, "This is very." We didn't know this at the time, but this could have been the last time she talked to me, and it was the last time we had spoken. And she says, "Kim, don't tell anybody that I had cancer. Looking back, I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh because obviously this is tragic, but I laugh because like Louisa even says to Aunt Patty, like, what does that even matter? Like, why does that even, of all the things for you to think about right now, why is that the thing?
Because it's about status. It's about pitying. It's about how you're going to leave your mark.
Yes.
And I definitely think that's an Asian thing. Huge Asian thing.
Huge Asian
it's
thing.
Success. It's how you're going to leave
Your
mark.
health. Like, oh, I don't want people to know that I was unhealthy.
That's part of your success. That's part of your legacy. And you don't want to be pitied.
Yeah.
Being pitied is...
Yes.
On top of everything, is being pitied is the worst thing that could ever happen.
Yeah.
And so having that status of, I took care of myself, I had good health, I had a good family, I was successful, is, I think, top in Asian culture.
Kat, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Because, of course, like, I look back and I'm like, Auntie, why was that the last thing we talked about? Like,
to make sure that you carried her legacy in the way she wanted.
Oh, well, now I've totally doxed her.
Well, but you know what I mean? Well,
she's looking down being like, you dummy.
Hopefully she's looking down being like, oh, right, I'm a human being and people can relate to me because now I'm a human being.
Yeah.
But yeah.
R.I.P. She was awesome. She really was an awesome woman. And I hope that if she can hear this and she can experience this from the other dimension, that she knows that it came from a place of love, of wanting to know that, of memorializing her in a way that I hope we can all look at and learn from it and go, you know what? That's silly. We don't need to do that. And we can not be on our deathbed and worry about what people are going to think, and that you had cancer, and instead embrace just experiencing those last moments with your family and having a totally different experience than that. But yeah, I wanted to say that because that came from my life. And I know obviously the circumstances are different in the show, but that came directly from my life. And then, the differences between Patty and Sherry and Louisa. Oh, and the lie. Trey.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I think that... So, if anybody's watching The Pit, it's my new favorite show.
So good.
It's not a spoiler, but in
good.
season 2, when the opening scene of season 2 is our favorite. Noah Wiley, Dr. Robbie, who we all know and love, riding his motorcycle through the streets of Pittsburgh with no helmet on.
And everyone was so pissed online.
And ER,
do you know that?
Yes,
Everyone was so pissed
but it was
online.
a purposeful choice,
Of course
right?
it was. And everyone, that's the thing, is that so many people were like so pissed. And then there were like the true fans that were like, there's a reason behind it.
There's a reason.
Just you wait.
Fun fact about me, I thought at one point in my life when I was in high school, I was in a pre-medicine magnet. I know, it sounds crazy. That's the Asian coming out in me. I was in a pre-medicine magnet in high school, and I was in, honestly, what would have been probably college level educated type medical classes. And we had to do clinical rotations. We had to go into everything from hospitals, nursing homes, rehabilitation centers. And one of the things I learned really early on is sometimes the most destructive people are healthcare workers. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because, as you know, The Pit so brilliantly addresses, is the trauma that they experience literally every day they go into work, and have to somehow suppress that or process that immediately so that they can go to the next patient and be their best for the next patient and the next day and the next shift. This is my very long walk to say that I think sometimes the most therapized people, and I'm talking from my own experience, can often be the most destructive, self-destructive, right? Self-sabotage. I think this is Louisa starting her therapy journey, and without giving spoilers, but I think she needs to now, she's kind of opened Pandora's box, and not only with her mother's tapes, learning what she knows about her family, learning what she knows about her mother's past, what she will find out in season 2 more about her mother and her family. But I think she needs to experience a bit of that self-destructiveness that maybe her mother had. And now that's kind of like we now have opened the door to that a little bit. And part of that is Trey is, quite frankly, as a straight woman, I have definitely sought love, romantic love, and I have it right now. And I've certainly been boy crazy in the past. Luisa even says in season 1 to Raina that she wants to find what Raina and Ronnie have, this beautiful love that feels so right. And then she finds it. But it's at the same time that she's also getting real deep in her mother's darkness. Into dark histories of her own family. And now we're going to see how that plays out in her life.
And I don't think I've even shared this with you, Kim, but like as a listener, like, cause I think I just like re-listened to Babalu because of everything going on, obviously with Tribeca and everything. And I was like, sometimes when someone loses a parent or loses a family member at such a young age, and then they get into a romantic relationship, they push away that person because they're wondering, how much can I push you away? Will you leave? Just like this other person left me, or, how far can I push you? Do you love me enough to come back?
That
girl. Ooh, I like that interpretation. My interpretation was also like, well, what if he finds out about this about me, and then he doesn't love me anymore? Yeah.
All of the above. I think you two are truly eloquently saying what I didn't just say, but like truly, like that is it. It's this idea of obviously self-sabotage and self-destructiveness comes from a place of protecting yourself. The irony of that, like it's obviously it's counterintuitive, but it's let me push you away, and or love bomb you, right? And see what happens, and see if you are going to be dedicated to me and prove that you love me, or leave me, because I knew you were going to leave me anyway.
Or am I enough? Or am I enough for you to love me?
And I think also, I can't remember if we talked about it in the last B-sides, but Sherry ghosting her friend who is like, yep, I'm gay and it's great and I love it, come have dinner with me. And then her deciding, I was like, oh, Sherry. There's so many layers that I feel like we could have we could talk about this literally forever. And I want to thank both of you for being so open about your own experiences, and Kim being so revealing about the parts of you that you injected in Babalu, because I know it's had to be so tough to excavate that and figure out how to tell those stories in a neutral way, but it clearly has resonated so much with listeners, definitely with me as a listener, and Kat too. Thank you for sharing your insights. I would love it if the folks listening to today's episode could drop in the comments or reviews if they liked it, or if they wanted to hear more, where we could go. But do you guys have any final words regarding these really incredible topics we talked about and barely scratched the surface of?
I think it's really important to tell your story. To tell the story that you know from your point of view, from your culture, whether it's a multicultural or not, and to be very proud to stand up and tell your story.
Yeah.
Whether you're in a creative lens or just in your friend group.
I love that. Yeah, these things are hard. Life is hard. Like, we are... funny enough, I feel like we are in probably the most enlightened point of our history, yet somehow we have regressed in a lot of ways as a culture and a society. I'm talking specifically to American politics, if I may, but I hope that you find community, and I hope that you know that you're not alone. And if anything, that this show, Babalu, and the creators behind it, all the people involved, truly everyone, I think everyone, not just listeners, but like I said, our production team, everybody who's been involved have seen themselves in this show in some way or another. And it just goes to show how it doesn't matter what your culture is, what your background is, if you're mixed race, whatever, came here from China, what have you, like you have an incredible story and you're not alone. And I'm sure it feels that way sometimes, but like Kat said, tell your story, talk therapy,
or talk to your friends, talk to your community.
Exactly. Talk to your friends, get online, find community. this, funny enough, the irony of writing Babalu. So I'll just quickly say that in the last few months, I've had like a pretty wild ride. I was laid off from my job, funny enough, and literally laid off the day after my birthday. I'm a writer. I can't make this up. And laid off the day after my birthday. Then within weeks, we got this Tribeca news. Literally, I literally got the Tribeca news while I was filing for unemployment. I'm hand to God. I literally was sat at my computer, finish my application, hit submit, go to my phone, or I'm sorry, go to my email, and I'm like, hey, what's this email? It was Tribeca. It was the Tribeca news. It literally came in while I was working on my unemployment application. Life is wild, and all I can say is that it's so unpredictable, but like, my point is the irony of working on Babalu, which is a series about Asian American women and mental health, and being an Asian American woman, having some really wild times in my life as of late, being able to come back to my art and being able to come back to this show and work on it and get the Tribeca news and be able to share that with the team has, like, ironically kept me very grounded and centered. So maybe you're inspired and you go and you write your own thing for your own self, and talk into a computer and start writing for yourself. But there's so much out there, and we need more stories like this.
Yeah.
Period.
100%. Thank you both so much. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Babalu B-Sides. Tribeca, June 2nd, you said? Or
June 9th.
June 9th, 2:30.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Hey, this is Kim. Thank you again for tuning in to Babalu B-Sides. I'd love to thank Westport Studios for all of their amazing work on this after show, and our incredible host, Jackie Rae Aubel. If you loved these B-Side episodes, feel free to reach out and let us know if you want more. And if you'd like to support the making of Babalu Season 2, head to buymeacoffee.com/Babalu. Also, if you just so happen to be near the Tribeca Film Festival, come see us on Tuesday, June 9th at 2:30. We are being showcased as a part of Tribeca's live podcast stage. Again, thank you so much for being a part of the Babalu journey. We will see you in Season 2.